up, you do it. Number two, do you know how much they gave up to get Paul George? Do you realize how much they gave up to get Paul George? You can't just allow him to walk after 2 seasons when you're giving up that many picks and that many players. But number three is the most important thing I want to point out.
What's that?
Kawhi Leonard's happiness and leverage. If you have Paul George under contract, that may be reason for Kawhi to want to stay, depending on how well or not so well they do in this year's playoffs. And if he doesn't go well and they don't feel like that they're a dynamic duo moving forward, you know what this deal gives the Clippers flexibility to do? Trade a top 15 player while he still has multiple years left on his contract. That's what happens. We just saw a swap with John Wall happening with Russell Westbrook. They both have big cap numbers. That's what happens after you play a year or two of these deals. It gives him the security to know that he's going to get his top dollar, but it gives them the flexibility and the leverage to either keep him or move him.
Jalen, I have a question. They gave Paul George this max extension. Something tells me, and tell me if I'm reading too much into this, they also offered this to Kawhi Leonard. You wouldn't just offer this to George. You would also offer this to Kawhi. And something tells me that Kawhi was offered this and politely declined. Am I reading too much into this by saying that maybe Kawhi Leonard is not long for the Clippers?
I think that you should look at it the way you look at Giannis' situation. And you make sure that you acknowledge it really is not going to be a game changer for Giannis to sign the deal this year versus next year. But if you're Paul George and you played the way you played in the bubble, and you struggled in closeout games in Indiana, OKC, and the Clippers, you're not a finals MVP like Kawhi Leonard. You're not a regular season back-to-back MVP like Giannis. You take that bread. You take that bread. And that's exactly what he did.
Well, good for Paul George. Now $226 million richer. Congratulations, Mr. George, and Clippers fans. Because let's be honest, the Clippers franchise does not have a long history of winning and having star players on the roster, and they have that now with Paul George for the foreseeable future. Jalen, sometimes there's videos on the internet that we need to break down in detail. It's time for us to go to the table.
To do some counties in rural New Jersey. Clippers finished 3.5 games behind the Lakers last year in the West, then blew a 3-1 series lead to the Nuggets. Busy offseason, got rid of Doc Rivers, listened to Paul George, blame Rivers for his less than spectacular play, then opted to give out Paul George an additional $190 million in a max contract. So certainly plenty to discuss with the Clippers.
I love being here. I love the family that I've created in my first year. This is where I want to be. I owe him a trophy. That's what I owe this organization. This is a window that we're trying to capture. And my commitment and my job is to try to bring a title here. It's not putting a gun to Kawhi and you know, telling him he's got to do this or do that. Hopefully it's a mutual bond. You know, we both enjoy playing with one another. So everybody's got their own decisions to make. Hopefully me showing my commitment, being here and wanting to play with him long term sticks out.
Time now to welcome in our NBA senior writer, Ramona Shelburne. And Ramona, we had this news yesterday, but big picture now. What does Paul George's extension mean for Kawhi Leonard's future with the Clippers?
Well, look, Kawhi Leonard is going to take his time in deciding what he wants to do, but he could sign the same extension Paul George signed, okay? They would love for him to do that. Paul George signing this extension, though, gives Kawhi Leonard the best pitch the Clippers can make right now for why he should stay with the franchise. And I think Lawrence Frank, the general manager there, said it best when he was talking about that extension for Paul. It's one thing to trade for a star player. It's another thing to retain him. And I think there's a lot of debate right now about whether it would be a good contract for the Clippers in the future. Paul George is 30. But I think you have to have that security of knowing you have at least one of these franchise cornerstones locked up for years to come. And that's your pitch to Kawhi Leonard saying, come on, this is what you wanted when you came here.
Right.
We've given it to you. And this is the future we should have together.
Yeah, it's a great point when you look at both of these players. Notably, Kawhi obviously had the trade to Toronto, won the championship there, and then moved on to LA. So both of these players are very familiar with moving around and trying to hopefully get that duo that's going to compete for a championship. Speaking of duos, LeBron James and the Lakers with the shortest offseason in the history of the 4 major sports as we stay in LA. What are you hearing about how that will impact LeBron's playing time this season?
Well, look, they have their first 2 preseason games against the Clippers. And I don't expect LeBron James or Anthony Davis to play in either of them. I don't think we see them until next week when they play the Phoenix Suns. And I spoke with Frank Vogel, the Lakers coach, about this, and he said, I just want to make sure we ramp our guys up at the right pace. This is a delicate balance because if you know LeBron James the way we've all come to know him, he wants to play. I mean, he likes to play a lot of minutes. And this season, as you said, was the shortest offseason in NBA history. They've got to make sure their guys are in the right spot. So I think you're going to see a lot of the Lakers' new additions. Dennis Schroeder, Montrezl Harrell, Wesley Matthews, Marcus Gasol may or may not play this weekend against the Clippers, but you'll see some of him either in one of these first 2 games or next week against the Phoenix Suns. And, I was talking to Frank Vogel about this and some of the Lakers coaching staff, and they said that second unit, these new additions, they've really given the Lakers a real shot of a different energy. So when you have a championship team and you run it back, it's a veteran team. They know how to win. They know how to play together, but they also just won. And they don't have that same hunger that somebody like Montrezl Harrell or Dennis Schroeder, who didn't win, who wasn't a part of that group. And it gives them just a different look, a different energy. So I think you'll see a lot of the new additions in these first couple of games. And watch out for a guy named Talen Horton-Tucker. If you remember when they were playing the Houston Rockets, this second-round draft pick that they had last season for the Lakers just made a surprise appearance in the middle of a playoff game. They're really high on him. He's got a really long wingspan. They think he can play a big role for them this year. And you're going to see a lot of him in the preseason, along with Kostas Antetokounmpo, Giannis's younger brother. It's
going to be fun to watch because you're right. The infusion of new names doesn't take care of that complacency that you may otherwise have with a team that's all been there before. Ramona Shelburne, look, quick offseason for them means quick offseason for you. Appreciate you joining us here on SportsCenter with some perspective on the Lakers and the Clippers.
And that's why you don't win. If they're not